There is a woman in Ogimi village in northern Okinawa who is 103 years old. I am not rounding that number up. She gets up before dawn most mornings. She tends a small garden behind her house, and 3 days a week she still walks to visit her neighbor, who is 98. Ogimi has a nickname among the researchers who study it. They call it the Village of Longevity. And the reason they call it that is not folklore. It is census data. For decades, this small village in Okinawa has produced more people who live past 100 per capita than almost anywhere else on the planet that has ever been measured. In 2000, a researcher named Dr. Craig Wilcox, working alongside the Okinawa Centenarian study, a research program that has been tracking the island's oldest residents since 1975, sat down with families across the island and asked them one simple question: what did you eat for breakfast your entire life? The answers were almost identical, house after house, village after village. And what is in that answer is the part doctors did not pay attention to for nearly 30 years. They are paying attention now. My name does not matter as much as what I am about to tell you. I have spent the last several months going through the Okinawa Centenarian study, the Blue Zones research published by Dan Buettner and National Geographic, and the work of Dr. Makoto Suzuki, who spent his career documenting why this small chain of islands produced longer-living people than nearly anywhere else studied on Earth. And I am going to tell you exactly what they ate. Then I am going to tell you the part that should bother you, which is that the diet responsible for some of the longest-lived people ever studied is being replaced on the same island, in real time, by the exact food that is shortening lives everywhere else. Let me start with the breakfast itself, because this is where it begins every single day. The traditional Okinawan breakfast centers on a vegetable most Americans have never cooked with. It is called goya in the local dialect. You may know it as bitter melon. It looks like a warty, pale green cucumber, and it tastes exactly the way it sounds: bitter, sharp, almost medicinal on the first try. Okinawan households have eaten it nearly every single day for generations, most often in a stir-fry called goya champuru, made with tofu, egg, and sometimes a small amount of pork. Here is what modern researchers found when they finally looked closely at why this vegetable shows up at the center of nearly every long-lived household's table. Goya contains a compound that functions similarly to insulin in the human body. A study published in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology in 2011 found that extracts from bitter melon improved glucose metabolism and insulin sensitivity in human trials. Multiple subsequent studies, including ones reviewed by the National Institutes of Health, have continued to investigate bitter melon's effect on blood sugar regulation, specifically because traditional medicine across multiple cultures, not just Okinawa, identified this plant centuries before modern science explained why it worked. The second pillar of the traditional breakfast is purple sweet potato, locally called beni imo, not the orange sweet potato you find in an American grocery store, a deep purple variety, almost the color of a plum on the inside. That for most of Okinawa's history was not a side dish. It was the primary source of daily calories for the entire population, the way rice is the staple in mainland Japan, or potatoes were the staple in parts of Europe. A study published in the Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry analyzed the anthocyanin content of purple sweet potato, the compound responsible for its deep color, and found antioxidant activity significantly higher than many other commonly studied vegetables. Antioxidants are not a buzzword here. They are compounds that neutralize free radicals, the unstable molecules linked to cellular aging, and the kind of chronic inflammation associated with heart disease and several cancers. The third element, eaten almost daily, is miso soup, made not from the thick red miso common in mainland Japanese cooking, but a lighter, often white miso, frequently combined with seaweed. Okinawans eat more seaweed per capita than almost any population that has been studied, primarily a variety called mozuku, a thin, slippery brown seaweed unique to the waters surrounding the islands. Research published by Japanese food science journals has identified fukoidan, a compound found in mozuku and similar seaweeds, as having documented anti-inflammatory and anticoagulant properties under laboratory conditions. Tofu rounds out the plate. Not the bland, flavorless tofu most Americans have tried once and never touched again. Okinawan tofu is firmer, denser, often eaten warm straight from the pot it was made in that morning, and it shows up at breakfast as often as it shows up at dinner. Soy-based protein consumed at this frequency, replacing animal protein at most meals, has been one of the most consistently cited factors across every major study of the Okinawan diet, including the original research compiled by Dr. Suzuki and later expanded by the Okinawa centenarian study. Put that plate together. Bitter melon, purple sweet potato, light miso with seaweed, tofu, almost no refined sugar, almost no red meat at breakfast at all, and occasionally a small piece of pork prepared in a very specific way I will get to in a moment, because pork in Okinawa is not eaten the way pork is eaten in the rest of the world, and that distinction matters more than people realize. Here is the number that made researchers take this seriously enough to spend decades studying it. In the period when this study began in the 1970s, Okinawa had a rate of centenarians, people living to 100 or beyond, that was estimated at multiple times the rate found in the continental United States. Heart disease rates on the island were a fraction of mainland Japan's, which itself already had lower heart disease rates than America. Certain cancers, particularly breast and prostate cancer, appeared at substantially lower rates as well. This was not attributed by researchers to genetics alone. Multiple studies tracking Okinawans who migrated to Hawaii and the American mainland found that within a generation or two of adopting a Western diet, their health outcomes shifted toward the same disease rates as the country they moved to. Genetics did not protect them once the food changed. The food itself was doing something. Now here's the part that should genuinely concern you, because it is happening on the same island, to the same population right now. After World War II, the United States military maintained a significant and prolonged presence on Okinawa, and with that presence came an influx of American processed food, fast food chains, and Western dietary habits, introduced over decades into a population that had not eaten that way before. Spam, introduced originally through American military rations, became so embedded in modern Okinawan cuisine that it is now a defining ingredient in many contemporary Okinawan dishes, something that would have been almost unthinkable in the traditional diet researchers studied just 2 generations earlier. The data reflects this shift in real time. More recent studies tracking Okinawa's younger generations have found that the island's once celebrated life expectancy advantage has narrowed substantially. Some research has even found that younger Okinawan men now have life expectancy rates that no longer lead Japan, a dramatic reversal from the decades when Okinawa was held up globally as the example to study. Researchers studying this shift have directly pointed to the generational change in diet, away from Goya, sweet potato, tofu, and seaweed, and toward the processed and fast food that became widely available after the war. As a primary driver, the exact diet that made international researchers study this island for 50 years is disappearing inside the population that created it, replaced by the same food that is driving chronic disease everywhere else on Earth. Nobody buried this. There was no single villain. It happened the way these things usually happen, slowly, through changing availability, changing convenience, and several generations simply eating what was easiest to find. Doctors are paying attention to it now because the reversal itself became a kind of natural experiment. When a population with documented multi-decade health advantages changes its diet and its health outcomes change along with it within a generation, that is about as close to controlled evidence as nutritional science is ever able to get from a real human population, rather than a laboratory. So here is what the original breakfast actually looked like. The version researchers documented from the centenarians who were already elderly when this research started in the 1970s. People who were born in the early 1900s and ate this way their entire lives before any of the post-war changes reached their households. A small bowl of miso soup with mozuku seaweed and tofu, a portion of goya champuru, the bitter melon stir-fried with egg and tofu, a serving of steamed purple sweet potato in place of bread or rice, green tea, specifically a jasmine-infused variety called sanpin cha, which Okinawans drink throughout the day instead of soda or juice. That is the entire meal. No refined sugar, minimal animal protein. High in plant fiber, antioxidant compounds from the purple sweet potato, and the specific glucose-regulating compounds found in bitter melon, eaten daily and consistently for an entire lifetime, not as a diet but as the only food that was available and normal. There is one more piece of this that researchers consistently point to, separate from the food itself, called hara-hachi-bu, an old Confucian-influenced saying that Okinawan elders repeat at the end of a meal. meaning eat until you are 80% full. It is not a formal calorie restriction program. It is a cultural habit, repeated at every table for generations, that naturally limits caloric intake without anyone counting a single number. Researchers studying caloric restriction in laboratory animals have found connections between moderate, sustained calorie reduction and extended lifespan. And while human evidence is harder to establish definitively, the Okinawan population practicing this exact habit for generations remains one of the most studied real-world examples available. I am not going to tell you that eating bitter melon tomorrow morning will add 10 years to your life. That is not how any of this works, and anyone who tells you that is selling you something. What the actual research shows is more specific and, I think, more useful than that. A population that ate this way consistently for an entire lifetime produced some of the best documented longevity outcomes ever studied, and when that same population stopped eating this way, those outcomes started disappearing within a generation. The food did not make anyone immortal. The food appears to have been one piece of a system, alongside the social structure researchers call moai, lifelong friend groups that provide support into old age, alongside the sense of purpose Okinawans call ikigai, and alongside a level of daily physical activity built into normal life rather than scheduled at a gym, that together produced something genuinely unusual. If you want to try a piece of it, start with what is actually accessible. Bitter melon is sold in most Asian grocery stores in America today. Purple sweet potato is increasingly available in regular supermarkets, often labeled as Okinawan or Japanese sweet potato. Miso paste and dried seaweed are shelf-stable and inexpensive. None of it costs what a supplement aisle costs, and none of it requires you to trust a label printed by a company trying to sell you something. Tell me in the comments if you have ever tried bitter melon, and what you thought of it, because I promise you the first bite is not what most people expect. Tell me what part of the country you are in, and whether your local grocery store carries any of this. Next week, I want to walk through the second pillar of this research, the social structure called moai, because the researchers who studied Okinawa's centenarians increasingly believe the relationships people maintained into their 90s mattered just as much as anything on their breakfast plate. The data on loneliness and lifespan is stronger than most people realize, and it is coming next.